Austin, Texas, where the skyline glows with ambition and the air smells like burnt coffee and deadlines. 5 years ago, I walked into Ether Technologies with a second-hand laptop and a head full of equations, determined to build something that mattered. I didn't have connections, family wealth, or an Ivy League degree. But I had an idea and a work ethic that didn't know how to quit. That idea became Project Titan, a data-driven logistics system that could predict supply chain failures before they happened. I built it line by line, often sleeping under my desk, surviving on instant noodles and caffeine. And when it finally worked, when the first prototype saved our biggest client from a multi-million-dollar disaster, I thought, this is it. This is my moment. For 5 years I kept Titan alive through budget cuts, layoffs, and one CEO who treated praise like it cost him money. His name was Edward Lane. Polished, calm, a man who could sell sand in a desert. He used words like vision, innovation, and team spirit. But when the cameras turned off, all he cared about were investors. Still, I believed in the mission. I believed in hard work. I believed that eventually someone would see me. I was wrong. That Monday morning began like any other. Sunrise spilling through the glass windows, servers humming like a heartbeat. The final phase of Titan's global rollout was complete. I had the reports ready, the presentation queued, every number aligned. When Edward called an all-hands announcement, I expected a milestone celebration, maybe even acknowledgement. He walked in with his trademark politician smile flanked by 2 board members. His suit was immaculate. His words rehearsed. "Everyone," he began, "today marks a new chapter for Project Titan and for Ether Technologies as a whole." My chest tightened with pride. Finally. Then he gestured to the young man standing beside him. Barely 30, crisp suit, slick confidence. "Please welcome Ethan Cross, our new executive lead for Titan. He'll be steering the project into its next generation." For a moment the world went silent. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. Ethan Cross, son of Henry Cross, our largest investor. A man who'd visited our offices twice. Once for a photo op, once for a golf invitation. Edward continued, his tone syrupy and false. "Melissa has done an incredible job bringing Titan to life, but innovation thrives on fresh perspectives. Ethan will take it from here." Fresh perspective. The words echoed like a knife scraping glass. Around me people clapped. Polite, uneasy applause. I forced a smile, nodded once, and felt something inside me quietly turn to ash. When the meeting ended, I didn't move. I just sat there staring at the projector light fading across the wall. The future I'd built, my sleepless nights, my sacrifice had just been gift-wrapped and handed to a rich man's son. Edward's voice pulled me back. "Melissa," he said softly, like he was doing me a favor. "I know this is unexpected, but you'll be an important mentor for Ethan. Help him get up to speed." I smiled faintly. "Of course, Edward. Congratulations. Great decision." He laughed nervously, misreading my tone. "I knew you'd understand." "I do," I said, gathering my files. "Completely." As I walked out, I caught my reflection in the glass. Calm, steady, unreadable. Inside, though, a storm was forming. Back at my desk, I opened my laptop and stared at Titan's dashboard. Every metric, every algorithm, every bit of code carried my fingerprints. And buried deep inside the system was something no one else knew existed. A clause I'd written into Titan's architecture years ago. A safeguard. A line of code designed to prevent unauthorized transfers of system control without my encryption key. No one had ever asked why it was there. They just trusted that I knew what I was doing, and I did. That evening, while the office buzzed with empty congratulations, I sat alone typing my resignation letter. The words came easily. "Dear Edward, effective immediately, I resign from my position at Ether Technologies. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute to Project Titan. Congratulations on your new direction. Melissa Carter." I printed it, folded it neatly, and slid it into an envelope. When I walked back into his office, Edward was mid-conversation with Ethan, both grinning over a chart I'd built. I placed the envelope in front of him. "What's this?" Edward asked, still smiling. "My resignation," I said evenly. The smile faltered. "You can't be serious, right?" "Completely," I said. "You wanted a fresh perspective. You've got it." For a long moment he just stared at me. The kind of silence that only happens when someone realizes they've just lost something they didn't know they needed. I left before he could respond. Outside, the Texas sun was brutal, baking the asphalt, glinting off car roofs like mirrors. I took one last look at the Ether building, the glass tower I'd helped build from the inside out, and whispered under my breath, "Let's see how Titan runs without me." As I walked away, my phone buzzed. An unread email from legal. Subject line: transfer of core system permissions. Pending approval. Smiled. The game had just begun. The next morning, the office felt colder. Not the temperature, the energy. Conversation stopped when I passed by. Glances darted away. Word travels fast in tech, especially Betrayal. Everyone knew I'd resigned, and everyone wanted to know why. Kept my answers short. "Just time for a change," I'd say, smiling politely. But inside, my mind was already 10 steps ahead. At 9:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. From Edward Lane, subject transition assistance. "Melissa, thank you again for your professionalism yesterday. I know emotions can run high in these moments. Let's make the handover smooth. Please assist Ethan with the full Titan access transfer by Friday." Smooth. That word again, corporate translation. "Make it painless for us while we erase you." I read the message twice, then minimized it. My resignation was official, but I still had 2 weeks of notice to serve. That meant they still needed me. And Titan, my system, wasn't designed to obey just anyone. Ethan showed up at my desk not long after, all confidence and expensive cologne. He leaned against the cubicle wall like he owned the place already. "Hey Melissa, just wanted to say I'm really excited to work with you, even if it's just for the transition." He nodded. "Glad to hear that. Have you reviewed the system architecture yet?" "Not really. Dad says you built it pretty intuitively. I'm sure I'll pick it up fast." I forced a smile. "I'm sure you will." He grinned, completely unaware that under Titan's elegant dashboard sat layers of encrypted protocols. You couldn't pick it up fast, even if you had a PhD in machine learning. Titan had loyalty built into its code. That afternoon, I received a meeting invite from Edward. Titan Transfer Protocol 4 p.m. participants. Edward, Ethan, myself, legal. Legal being there told me everything. They wanted to make sure I didn't forget anything. When I entered the glass conference room, Edward stood near the window, hands in pockets, projecting calm authority. The city skyline shimmered behind him. A wall of glass and sunlight. Ethan sat at the table, tapping on his phone. The company lawyer, Vanessa, nodded politely when I came in. "Melissa," Edward began. "We just need your confirmation on the system handover. Nothing complicated." "Of course," I said, setting my laptop down. "But you'll need to approve the permissions through the vendor contracts first." Edward frowned. "Why is that necessary?" I opened a document and turned the screen toward them. Clause 12C, Third-Party Vendor Agreements. Any operational system transfer requires liaison authorization. My name is still listed as the contact. Vanessa leaned forward. "That's standard procedure. We'll have you sign a release." "Sure," I said calmly. "As long as the receiving party understands the implications." Ethan looked up, confused. "What implications?" I tapped the screen. "Once transferred, I lose all administrative rights to Titan. Meaning if anything goes wrong, security breaches, system crashes, vendor withdrawals, the responsibility falls solely on the new lead." Ethan blinked, the confidence flickering. Edward cleared his throat. "Let's not dramatize this, Melissa. It's a technical formality." "Of course," I said, smiling faintly. "Everything here is just a formality." I signed where they asked, then slid the paper back. My hand didn't shake. I'd built Titan to withstand corporate politics, greed, and ignorance. What they didn't realize was that one missing line of authorization would turn every vendor's access key into a locked door. When the meeting ended, Edward shook my hand. "You're handling this better than most would. 5 years in this company taught me patience," I said softly. "And planning." He laughed, uneasy this time. "Well, we'll take it from here." That evening I stayed late. Everyone else had gone home except for the cleaning staff. The office lights dimmed automatically after 8 p.m., leaving only the glow from my monitors. I opened Titan's command console, the real one, hidden behind 3 layers of encryption. Each client connection was listed like a heartbeat monitor. Stable, synchronized, alive. I typed a few lines of code, adding one final condition. If unauthorized user attempts system transfer, lock permissions and notify original architect. Quiet safeguard. Nothing destructive, just truth enforcement. Before closing the laptop, I whispered, "Stay loyal." The next morning, the buzz around the office was electric. Titan's official transition day. Edward strutted through the corridors, shaking hands. Ethan looked ready for a magazine cover. Tailored suit, perfect smile, rehearsed humility. He walked up to me with a confident grin. "Today's the big day. Ready to watch me press the button?" "Absolutely," I said, matching his smile. "Go make history." At 11:03 a.m., surrounded by cameras and department heads, Ethan took the stage in the presentation room. Edward gave his speech first, all about innovation, new leadership, next-gen strategy. I'd heard the same words 5 years ago when he first hired me. Then Ethan clicked the button on the projector, activating Titan Global Link. Applause filled the room. On the main screen, a progress bar appeared. 10%, 40%, 80%, then suddenly froze. A faint red message flashed at the top corner. Access authorization invalid. Liaison approval required. The applause faded into murmurs. Edward's smile stiffened. Ethan frowned and clicked again. Nothing. I stood at the back, hands clasped, expression calm. "Must be a minor bug," Ethan said, forcing a laugh. Edward turned toward me. "Melissa, any idea what's happening?" I met his eyes. "Looks like the system's asking for liaison approval as per the contract." Silence. The kind that feels like glass cracking. "I'm sure you'll figure it out," I added, picking up my bag. "Fresh perspectives, right?" And as I walked out of the room, the red warning light flickered again. Access denied. By the time I got home that evening, my phone had already buzzed 6 times. All from Edward. I didn't answer. I poured myself a glass of water, sat by the window, and watched the city flicker beneath the dark Texas sky. I knew exactly what had happened at Ether. Titan hadn't crashed. It had done exactly what it was designed to do. Protect itself from unauthorized hands. At 8:41 p.m., my phone lit up again. "Urgent. Call me now." I muted it and set it face down. For the first time in years, the silence didn't bother me. Felt like freedom. The next morning, I arrived at the office like nothing was wrong. The lobby felt tense. People spoke in hushed voices. The IT team was huddled in a corner, faces pale. As soon as I walked in, Mike, one of the engineers who'd worked under me, hurried over. "Melissa, what's going on?" "Titan's locked. No one can access the vendor systems. Edward's losing it." Kept my tone neutral. "Sounds like an authorization issue. They'll fix it." He frowned. "Did you know this could happen?" "I wrote the architecture," I said quietly. "I know what can't happen." Before he could say more, Edward's assistant appeared at my desk. "He wants to see you now." In his office, Edward stood behind his desk, sleeves rolled up, eyes red from lack of sleep. Ethan sat nearby, clicking a pen nervously. The energy in the room felt like static before a storm. "Melissa," Edward started, forcing calm. "We're having a small technical issue with Titan." "Small," I repeated. He exhaled sharply. "Fine, a major one. The system's refusing to grant us access. Every vendor's dashboard is frozen. They're threatening to pull contracts unless this is resolved immediately." I tilted my head slightly. Did you check the liaison clause? Ethan spoke up, defensive. We did. It says access requires authorization from the project's original architect, but you resigned. That shouldn't matter anymore. Actually, I said evenly. It matters a lot. The vendor's legal teams follow that clause, not your job titles. They can't operate without written approval from me. Edward's voice cracked. So what are you saying? That we're locked out of our own system? I'm saying, I replied, that Titan was built to prevent unauthorized use. You wanted fresh leadership, Edward. The system doesn't seem to agree. He slammed his hand against the desk. This is not a game, Melissa. We have millions in contracts on the line. I stayed silent, letting the words hang there. Then softly, you told me it was time for new energy. I simply stepped aside. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Edward's tone shifted. Quieter, almost pleading. Just help us unlock it. You know how much we need this launch. I'll compensate you. Compensate me, I said, raising an eyebrow. Edward, for 5 years, I built this company's most valuable product. You compensated me with overtime and silence. His jaw tightened. You're bitter. No, I said, standing. I'm awake. I turned to leave, but he called after me. Melissa, don't do this. Think about your reputation, about your future. Paused at the door. You should have thought about that yesterday. Back at my desk, I gathered my things. The office buzzed with panic. People whispering, phones ringing, someone swearing under their breath. Titan's failure had rippled through every department. Without access to the vendor systems, deliveries were halted, payments delayed, clients furious. I walked past the conference room where Ethan was trying to reassure a group of managers. We'll fix it by end of day, he said, voice trembling. No one believed him. Outside, the sun was brutal, the Texas heat almost mocking. I sat in my car for a moment, then opened my laptop. One notification blinked on Titan's backup server. Unauthorized transfer attempt detected. Access denied. Smiled. It wasn't revenge. It was justice by design. 2 hours later I got a message from Mike. Edward's calling an emergency meeting. He looked scared. Vendors are suspending contracts. I didn't reply. Instead, I stopped by a small cafe near the river. The same one I used to visit when I was still coding Titan at 2 a.m., dreaming about recognition. I ordered black coffee, the bitter kind that keeps you honest, and opened my notebook. If Ether wanted a lesson in value, they were about to get it. I spent the rest of the day sketching outlines for something new, something better. Titan's sister system built not for corporations but for integrity. I named it Helios. That night, as the city lights flickered across the water, my phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. I almost ignored it but answered. A familiar voice came through, calm but tight. Melissa, it's Henry Cross, Ethan's father, the investor. Leaned back. To what do I owe the honor? I understand there's been an issue with Titan. I'd like to discuss how we can resolve it. Privately. I smiled to myself. Of course, Mr. Cross. I'd be happy to talk. Excellent, he said. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, my office. When he hung up, I stared out at the dark Austin skyline and whispered, the board's moving its next piece. The difference was this time I'd already mapped the whole game. The next morning I arrived at the Cross Holdings building 15 minutes early. Glass walls, chrome accents and silence, the kind of place where deals were made in whispers and smiles. The receptionist, perfectly polite, escorted me to a conference room that smelled faintly of leather and new money. Henry Cross entered right on time. Early 60s, silver hair, perfectly pressed suit, the kind of man who never had to raise his voice because his name did it for him. He smiled, but it wasn't warmth. It was calculation. Melissa, he said, extending a hand. Thank you for coming. I shook it, steady and calm. Of course. I was curious what you'd want to discuss. He motioned for me to sit. I'll be direct. Ether Technologies is in trouble. Edward tells me Titan has gone offline due to technical complications. You built the system. You can fix it. I could, I said, folding my hands. But I don't work for Ether anymore. Henry's smile tightened. We're all adults here. Everyone can make mistakes. Edward may have mishandled the transition, but that's irrelevant now. What matters is restoring Titan before the investors panic. You understand business. I met his eyes. I understand cause and effect. He studied me for a moment, then leaned back. Let's talk plainly. If you help restore Titan, I can guarantee you a consulting fee. Generous, of course, and a recommendation to any company you choose. We can turn this around quietly. His tone was smooth, confident, the same tone I'd heard from executives all my career. The tone that said, "You need us." But this time I didn't. I opened my laptop and turned it toward him. On the screen was Titan's core dashboard, the locked version. The system pulse blinked red, steady, alive, but inaccessible. This, I said softly, is what happens when you hand over leadership without understanding the foundation. He frowned. Are you threatening me? No, I said, calm as stone. I'm explaining reality. The architecture requires liaison authorization. That clause was approved by your own legal team. Removing me broke the system's trust chain. Henry leaned forward, his voice dropping. And what if I told you we're considering legal action, claiming intellectual property mismanagement? I didn't flinch. Then I'd remind you that every contract tied to Titan includes my name as the technical liaison and architect. The system is traceable. Every access, every modification. Any attempt to alter it without my consent would constitute a breach on your end, not mine. He exhaled through his nose, assessing me. You're very composed for someone sitting across from the man who funds half the city's startups. I smiled faintly. And you're very composed for someone whose million-dollar project just stopped breathing. Silence, the kind that reveals who truly holds power. Finally he spoke again. Quieter. You could help us, Melissa. Save your legacy. Don't you care what happens to Titan? I looked him straight in the eye. I cared for 5 years. I gave it everything. Time, health, sleep. Then they took it and gave it to someone who'd never written a line of code. So yes, I care, just not in the way you expect. He sat back slowly. What do you want? The question I'd been waiting for. I want ownership, I said. Full rights to the next iteration of Titan. The framework, not the name. I'll restore the system, but not for Ether. For myself. You can either partner with me moving forward or watch Ether sink under its own arrogance. His expression flickered. Surprise, calculation, then something like respect. You're bold. I've just stopped being afraid, I replied. He stood, pacing to the window overlooking downtown Austin. If I agree, what happens to Edward? That's your problem, I said simply. But if you want Titan functional, you'll need my cooperation. No one else can rebuild what I wrote. He turned back, his voice lower. You're serious? Completely. He walked back to the table, studying me like an investor reading a volatile market. Then slowly he nodded. Draft me something. Proposal. We'll review it quietly. I already have one, I said, sliding an envelope across the table. Inside was a short contract I'd prepared the night before. US Systems LLC, my newly registered entity. He opened it, reading silently. You work fast. I've had practice cleaning up other people's messes. When the meeting ended, we shook hands again. This time as near equals. His grip was firm but colder than before. As I walked out into the sunlight, my phone vibrated. Message from Mike. Melissa, the office is chaos. Edward called an emergency board session. Vendors are threatening legal action. Ryan's trying to blame it. Type back one line. Tell them to check the logs. By the time I reached my car, I felt the tension drain from my shoulders. 4 years, I'd been the quiet worker in the background, the one who fixed everyone else's mistakes. Now the tables had turned. That evening, I sat by my apartment window with my laptop open. On the screen, a blank file titled Helios Framework, Draft 1. For the first time in 5 years, I wasn't writing for them. I was writing for me. The city outside hummed with traffic and neon light. Somewhere, Edward was probably shouting into a phone, trying to contain the fallout, and Henry Cross was likely calling his lawyers, reviewing my proposal, wondering if aligning with me might just be his smartest investment yet. I smiled faintly. People like them never realize that power doesn't come from titles. Comes from understanding the system and knowing when to walk away from it. Tomorrow I'd see who blinked first. By the end of that week, Austin's tech world was buzzing. Rumors spread fast. Ether Technologies' flagship system had gone dark. Clients were pulling out and their CEO was nowhere to be seen. I didn't have to check the news to know how bad it was. Every few hours, another ex-colleague messaged me. Vendors are freezing contracts. Legal's in meltdown. Ethan hasn't shown up in 2 days. I never replied. I didn't need to. Henry Cross, however, did call 3 times in 2 days. I finally answered on the 3rd. "Melissa," he said without preamble. "The board voted this morning. Edward's been removed as CEO effective immediately." I stayed silent for a moment, then quietly. "I'm sorry it came to that." "Don't be," he said. "He underestimated the wrong person. Your proposal US systems. The board has approved preliminary funding. I'll wire an advance tomorrow." I exhaled slowly, not from surprise but relief. "Thank you, Henry. One condition," he added. "When you rebuild Titan under your new name, we'd like to retain partial rights as investors. 20%. I smiled faintly. "You'll have 15%. No more." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "You drive a hard bargain, Miss Carter. 15 it is." When the call ended, I just sat there staring out my apartment window. The city lights blurred through the glass like streaks of electricity. After 5 years of silence, compromise, and being the reliable one, I finally felt what real control felt like. Quiet, steady, earned. 3 weeks later, US Systems had a nameplate on a shared office door. Mike and 2 other engineers from Ether joined me, tired of the chaos and corporate spin. We worked late, fueled by cheap coffee and something purer than ambition, purpose. While we rebuilt, Ether unraveled. I watched from a distance as Edward tried to spin public statements about temporary system issues, but investors weren't buying it. Vendors demanded proof of compliance. Clients started migrating their contracts elsewhere. Irony. Many of them reached out to me. "Melissa, we heard you're starting something new. Can we talk?" That first week, we signed 3 clients, all former Ether partners. Each one wanted a version of Titan they could trust. Transparent, accountable, human. I didn't just give them that. I gave them Helios. One evening around midnight, I received an unexpected message. Ether's logo, sender Edward Lane. "You win. Happy now." I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. It was never about winning. It was about fairness. He didn't respond. He didn't have to. The next morning, the news broke. Former Ether CEO under investigation for financial mismanagement and data compliance violations. Ethan's name appeared briefly in a footnote listed as no longer affiliated. I felt no satisfaction, just clarity. People who build their success on others' work always assume the foundation will hold forever. But every system has a limit. Every lie has a timestamp. 2 months later, EOS officially launched. Henry attended the small press event, smiling for the cameras. "We believe in integrity-driven innovation," he said, reading from the prepared notes I'd written. "Systems built not just to perform but to protect." When it was my turn to speak, I kept it short. I named this company EOS after the dawn. Because every ending brings light if you wait long enough. The applause was polite, genuine. Cameras flashed. But the moment that stayed with me came afterward when Mike raised his coffee cup and said, "You know what's funny? They said Titan needed a fresh perspective. Guess they were right." We all laughed, not bitterly but freely. That night, I walked home through the quiet streets of Austin. The air was cool for once, the kind of calm the city rarely offered. I passed by Ether's tower. Its lights dimmer now, fewer cars in the lot. The building looked hollow, as if it was still trying to remember what it used to be. I stopped for a moment, studying the mirrored glass. My reflection looked back, older, sharper, but at peace. I thought about those early years, the long nights, the exhaustion, the moments I almost quit. How I'd believed that hard work alone guaranteed respect. But respect without boundaries is just a longer leash. When you build something, you must also protect it. Not from failure, but from those who believe ownership comes from titles instead of sweat. A soft breeze moved through the street. Somewhere in the distance, a neon sign flickered. Open all night. I smiled, pulled my coat tighter and kept walking. Tomorrow the real work would begin. Helios wasn't just a system. It was a statement. Proof that integrity could still win in a world obsessed with shortcuts. I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need recognition. What I had was better. Peace, independence, and a future built on my own terms. Before turning the corner, I glanced one last time at Ether's fading logo high above the city and whispered, "Fresh perspectives, right?" Then I walked away, not out of bitterness, but because I finally could.